Fertility is the ultimate barometer of our overall health for both men and women. True?
100%.
False.
It's literally 100% true. You should probably look at both of them right away, because you could waste 2 years trying to fix her when it was actually him the whole time. Honestly, it starts declining the minute you get your first period. Like
The countdown is on.
Yeah, the countdown is on. We're chasing this sensation of like fresh scent and cleanliness. You are consistently blocking and confusing your endocrine system.
Wow.
So you're not producing estrogens properly. The same applies to testosterone production. And people are just completely unaware.
What's the single biggest mistake that people are still making for fertility nowadays?
Honestly,
Hi there. Welcome to a new episode of Sanno Health Podcast. Today, I'm very excited because we are going to unpack and debunk fertility. We are entering into a new era of fertility care where fertility is not isolated, right? We're going to look into gut health. We are also going to talk about how data can help us manage better fertility. So I've got you one of the best experts to talk about this, which is Sofi Teleky. Sofi, welcome to the show.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very excited. The moment I met you, it was like an instant, I don't know how I should say that, but I'm like, wow. Like, in functional medicine, it's like a crash. You find someone knowledgeable, fun, interactive, and I love your clear views on things. So
Thank you.
I cannot wait.
Thank you.
And basically, the reason why I wanted to talk to you about fertility, of course, you do a lot of work as a practitioner around women's health. Fertility is a topic that you're passionate about, but also it's because we are seeing out there, right, the infertility, let's put it this way, rates are skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And there is so much like unspoken truth about it.
That is very true.
So this is what we are gonna unpack today.
Yeah.
But first, Sofi, I would like you tell me and our audience, like, what's your journey to functional medicine up to date?
To be honest, I was born into it. I grew up in communist Hungary in the late 70s, early 80s. And my father was a scientist. And I grew up with him already being leagues ahead in knowledge in terms of nutrition. So he was kind of like that outlier that would make apple cider vinegar at home. Like my mom had this old style centrifuge, where you do just to spin your clothes. This is how old I am, right? This is 70s. And he would like grate the apple down and put it in the centrifuge and spin it. So the apple, he would ferment his old apple cider vinegar.
Oh, wow.
He would make kombucha, make us drink it. Like we were the weird kids in class because he'd be like, here's your bee pollen. He'd make us eat it, liquid vitamin C in an ampoule, and like that was my childhood. Coca-Cola was garbage. I didn't taste it till I was 13, 14 when we finally got to Canada. He said margarine is toxic. It'll break your cell walls down. So he knew these things. And we were like eye rolling. I'm one of 4 kids. But now looking back, I mean, growing up like that gave me such a foundation in terms of my metabolic health that I'm, as annoyed I was then, I'm nothing but grateful now.
Wow. So you literally grow into it, right? And that's such a beautiful advantage, by the way.
Yeah, I think so.
To have that exposure, right? That early on.
Yeah, and I was 10 years old when Chernobyl happened. Right, so we had a whole year where there was no fresh milk, no fresh vegetables, none of that. You were not really allowed outside. Wow. But my mom was incredibly well prepared, which was, more common back then around that time, where we had all the summer vegetables put away for the winter in the glass bottles, like a stewed tomato, or like the ratatouille, or the fermented cabbages and things. So we actually made it through it, but that's just how we grew up at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, key learnings, right? Like out of, a situation like that. Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure. So that's my background. I also, I'm 28 years in tech. I started out in online payments, et cetera, and now we're in digital trade and blockchain and AI and all that kind of stuff. So I apply a lot of my analytical, technical background to the nutritional Like this biochemistry, the nutritional sciences, that's like a real passion of mine. So I love combining it and looking at it from different perspectives.
Well, I can't wait about, this conversation, because we exactly are gonna mix all your functional medicine knowledge with this more tech background, AI, data, and how in the practice. By the way, you are running your own, or about to run your own practice, which is also very exciting.
Yeah, we're creating a type of methodology that has me really excited. So stay tuned.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so without further ado, let's jump and deep dive into this new era of fertility care.
Yeah.
And Sophie, I wanted to crack on by asking you, what's your view? Because currently it really seems there's an epidemic out there around infertility.
Yeah.
Like, when we look into the data, and I'm not even talking about women's infertility, even men's infertility. Is it about because of the lifestyle we live in, the food we eat? What's your view on this?
It is obviously a combination of many, many, many things. I read an amazing book a few years ago, and I'd recommend it to your audience as well. It's called The Empty Planet.
The Empty Planet.
Empty Planet, yeah. I'll show you. Honestly, it put a lot of things in perspective. And I mean, I read it obviously because I was already going down that road. But the author talks about the amount of exposure we have to the endocrine disruptors. And that is a slew of things. But mostly, we've heard the expression, the forever chemicals, all the things that are in our waters, the glyphosate, the BPAs, the plastics, and all these things. Phthalates being a huge, huge contributor. What these things do is, especially for women in this sense, let's take on that. Phthalates, for example, which is in perfumes, creams, in everything, right? Personal care products. When phthalates enter your system, and you can inhale it, it's like, like Glade plugins or like perfumes or scented candles, it's full. Phthalates enter your system and it mimics estrogen. So all your cells have estrogen receptors on them. Literally it's like rich in estrogen receptors. And these phthalates mimic it and block the estrogen receptors, so actual estrogen can get in there. And it just kind of confuses this messaging. So when you're walking these things, like I would go to my dentist office or whatever offices, and these secretaries are sitting there with this full like electric plug-in scented things, like, because we're chasing this sensation of like fresh scent and cleanliness, but you are consistently blocking and confusing your endocrine system.
Wow.
So you're not producing estrogens properly. The same applies to testosterone production, etc.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just with this one example that you gave, right?
Yeah.
I can think of so many like situations wherever I go that there are all these perfumes.
And any Uber you get into. I mean, I have it on my Uber, like, please, no air freshener. Yeah, 100%. Wow. And people are just completely unaware. We have little girls or, covering themselves with like Jennifer Lopez disco ball perfume, just like saturating, or, fabric softener. So you want, like, that's sitting on your skin all day, soaked into the material.
But this is crazy.
It's huge. Yeah,
So what you're telling me is that it's just a lot of products we use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And anywhere we go that has this kind of retail, transportation, even in clinics, right? You mentioned. We have these endocrine disruptors. And wow, I'm actually quite shocked right now.
Yeah, it's
as I'm getting aware of this, Sophie. But so what are the cases you have seen recently in your practice in clinic where, I don't know, like a very young lady comes to you already with all that kind of endocrine system completely messed up?
Oh yeah,
you see that?
So yeah, like a 28-year-old can get pregnant. The combination there was that she was also like 8 years vegan. In her case, it was a combination where she didn't have the right materials to make the hormones anymore. Because to make hormones, you need a sufficient amount of your fatty acids and cholesterol, right? Because your body uses cholesterol and fats to make hormones. So we needed to, in this sense, your cells are made up of like the cell protective bubble is made up of like phospholipids and cholesterol, a bit of protein and stuff. But to have the right absorption and breakdown and usage of fatty acids and these phospholipids and cholesterol, you need the right diet. Like that's holding your cells correctly, and that's and on your cells you have these receptors. So it's in her case, we got her slowly back on like egg yolks and to get the fats going. You know.
Well, I mean, we're going to get into more of the details, but another question I wanted to speak with you about, is gut and fertility. Is there a connection? Because, of course, the endocrine disruptors are massive, but when we go back to food, we go back to, of course, guts. Our 70% of our immune cells live in the gut.
Yeah.
What is the role between gut and fertility?
Let's go with, for example, PCOS. It's one of the biggest problems for young women in fertility. Like, how does that happen, right? What is, and I love the work of Dr. Ben Bickman, because he talks about PCOS as being a result of insulin resistance. So, and how do we get insulin resistant? It's normally like you have too much insulin in your blood. How does that happen? You have too much glucose in your blood. So when you have too much glucose in the blood, you have glucose in the blood, insulin comes, takes glucose from the blood, puts it in the cell. That's the job of insulin, right? So when you have too much insulin, you're becoming resistant to your insulin. That's hyperinsulinemia. That's insulin resistance. And what happens is, again, insulin, as a young woman, when you're having your cycles, right? You have your cycle, there's a period, we all know, every woman goes through it. And it should go normally, luteal, follicle, there's a cycle. And our ovaries are preparing these little eggs to ripen and towards ovulation. And when ovulation happens, one egg goes, ovulates, and then all the eggs that were prepared at the time will then go out with the period. Like that's the
cycle process.
Now, when you have too much insulin prohibits ovulation in a sense where right before ovulation, women have this big surge of estrogen, and that causes ovulation, and the whole process begins. But when you have too much insulin, it blocks this process from happening, so you don't ovulate, and it's right. So that doesn't happen. So when that doesn't happen, all these eggs that didn't make it, that didn't ovulate and didn't leave, they stay behind and become cystic.
Wow.
Right? So we're stopping this whole process.
Wow.
And a lot of, we're putting 12-year-olds on birth control. We need to stop doing that. Because we're instead of figuring out how to get the insulin under control, maybe their diet is not so horrible, but they're under a massive amount of stress. That can cause, there's so many contributing factors here. You are putting your body and your endocrine system under stress. It can cause this kind of insulin resistance. So the combination of any which way is endless, and that's why I think in my world, precision nutrition, have someone that sits down with you, listens to you, and does a type of detective work.
Right.
On your case, because, we're all unique snowflakes in a sense.
Everyone is
However, there is fundamental laws of biology that do apply to us all. And there is this balance that needs to be struck.
Well, I love that you explain this so visually, it's kind of easy to understand. And as you were talking, right, I was thinking all the foods, probably the lifestyle, the diets, right, have such a massive role in this insulin resistance point that you just talked about. So tell us a bit more about, for example, carbohydrates, right? Mm-hmm. If they make us pick that insulin, if I have a very high intense carbohydrate diet, am I putting my fertility at risk?
Yeah. So it also depends on the type of carbohydrate, right? Let's be honest there. There is the different ways to consume them, right? So if you're eating Wonder Bread and donuts on the daily, you're not going to have a good time. Your body is not going to have a good time. You're having sushi, resistant starch, very different for glucose spikes. boiled sweet potato versus baked sweet potato, two different glucose experiences. Well-cooked vegetables are actually carbohydrates. Fruits, fresh fruits, whole fruits, carbohydrate,
Right.
Fruit juice versus whole fruit, two different mechanisms, right? Like on a fruit juice, it's like you're basically fatty liver all the way because it's like pure fructose. You don't have the fiber with it, Drinking apple juice versus eating a whole apple, two different
I love
exposures.
that you're like making that point, right?
Yeah.
Because the way that we consume like one same food type can have such a radical impact.
Yeah. My favorite is oat milk latte. Ooh, I'm being so healthy. I'm having my oat milk. I'd rather you smoked a cigarette. I mean, it's garbage. It's complete garbage. The way no oat makes milk. Like it's crazy sauce to me.
But is that because oat milk can be so
it'll
processed?
Spike your blood glucose more than like a handful of gummy bears.
What? But that is, I need to understand this. I'm sure like people listening to us are like, can you just go back to this, please? Did I hear this correctly?
Yeah. What else can cause, a blood sugar spike or that, is starch, pure starch. And, you imagine you're soaking a bunch of oats with all these like hexane and like you have to, soak it in all these chemicals and then push it through and all that. And did your grandma do that, a few hundred years ago? No, exactly. So all these processes, right? Yeah.
But wow, Sophie, I mean, we're already unpacking a lot of insights here.
Yeah.
In connection with sourcing supplements, hear me out. If you are a practitioner, register on amritanutrition.com to source your supplements, to benefit from commissions, and also to access the basic plan of Sanno's practice management system. Now, let's continue with the episode. I mean, another one I wanted to ask you about around fertility, right, is that all the tests that, practitioners prescribe women to kind of, in that process. And I wanted to get your thoughts around this, also to talk a little bit how functional medicine approaches, we hear a lot about functional testing for fertility. What that is exactly?
Well, there's a few options out there right now, and they're quite great. One of them that came out in the last decade that is incredibly impactful is not just for fertility, but just understanding women, period, and its cycles and hormones, is the Dutch test, the dry urine analysis. That has been, and you can order that. You can get your practitioner to order it for you and to do the interpretations, because it doesn't give you, if you just go regularly and get a blood work done on any day and in the morning, I mean, you're getting a snapshot of your hormonal of that moment, and that's not how we work. Our hormones are like,
up and down,
exactly,
all the time.
And this one is a 24-hour test that throughout the day, at a certain amount of time. You take a little wee in a cup and you dip your little piece of paper and you dry it out, and they measure that way. But interestingly, I just now here there's a booth, and I found that really interesting. It's a Portuguese company. It's the Gin Screen. They just started, but it's you log on and you can get a vaginal swab. And it measures you for all sorts of possible STIs that you might not even be aware of that you're carrying. And all the for fungal infections, candidas, or herpes simplex, all sorts of different issues that could be preventing you from conception.
Wow.
Because if the pH level is off, obviously, things need to be kept alive. In that, and how that environment is maintained, and it's I find that, and that's literally, you could do that.
I wanna talk a little bit more about this, and just for our audience, just to give some context, we are recording this from the International Conference of Integrative Medicine, which is a gift to be here, in Porto and meet incredible professionals like you, Sophie. But to your point, I love that you bring that up, because all this new generation of testing and functional testing around fertility can actually empower women. Like, it's not like GP or doctor has all the control, that's it. They hold the pan of your fertility journey. It's also like, are there any ways, any tests, any data that we can use to empower ourselves? I mean, you
100%.
mentioned the vaginal kind of, sample. Super interesting, right? How you mentioned that can impact the fluctuations of our
Absolutely.
fertility. Are there other like indicators that we could see in testing, for example, from a functional perspective?
Listen,
help us?
sometimes you don't even get tested. Let's say, are you regular? Are you tracking? Like, what does your cycle look like? How are you feeling? You know, this is where you need to tune into yourself and reacquaint yourself with how you're feeling, right? One, but you know, are you regular? There's in blood work, like any GP will do it. You can now have access to a lot of these tests, but for example, is your thyroid functioning properly?
That's a big
and
one.
not just your total TSH, because that's like you know, just a number right there. It could be an indicator, but ideally, if we really want to look it down, you know, T3, T4, free T3, reverse T3, like you need to. There's multiple. What do you have? Thyroid antibody issues? Are you borderline Hashimoto's? Should we look into that? But if you should look at the thyroid if, for example, do you get heart palpitations? You know, is your skin dry on your arms? You know, or hands and feet cold? You know, how are you regulating your body temperature? Are you know what I mean? Like that. If any of those are popping up for you, look at your thyroid.
And Sophie, I just try to now relate to a lot of women listening to us. They might find this quite overwhelming because they might rely on, you know, traditional doctor to tell, hey, do all this, exactly what you're telling me.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, we do a lot of work, right? Like from a Sanno perspective, powering up functional practitioners like yourself, because we need that. And do you see women in clinic coming to you completely lost and overwhelmed?
Oh, 100%.
How you guide them, right?
100%. Normally, by the time, and I mean, I work a lot with doctors' referrals. By the time they're coming to me, they've gone through that. The doctor is like Pontius Pilate, like, I wash my hands of this, do something, because I don't know what to do with this person anymore. That happens, yeah.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the role of traditional medicine and kind of, you know, this clash, if you want, with functional medicine. Yeah. But now let's go to one of my favorite sections. I know you have been waiting for it, which is true or false. And this is going to be the true or false of fertility edition. And I want you to be super like, okay, whatever comes out is the fireside chat.
All right.
You ready, Sophie?
Ready.
Let's go. The first one is, fertility is the ultimate barometer of our overall health for both men and women. True?
100%. 100%.
False.
It's literally 100% true. Because my favorite professor in Boston said, we are still so animalistic. Like, we are animals, we're apex predators. We are here, and he would say that our main function is to do the 3 Fs. We are here to feed, fight.
And I think we can assume what the third one.
This is our main function. Like, it is, as long as your urges are intact, like, you know, like a woman, you know how you know you're healthy? Like how a woman chooses a mate shows her health. Like, you know the main, how a healthy woman would choose a man, her main criteria is,
I can assume,
can he acquire me resources? Yeah, like that's, you know, can he make fire? You know what I mean? Put that in today's context.
It's kind of a primal thought, right?
Is.
It's how we were originally wired, right?
And when we're putting 12-year-olds on birth control, these girls stop with, like, they don't know how to pick the mate anymore because we're blocking that. So they end up with like...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's now jump to the second one, which is the rise in fertility issues is primarily driven by people waiting too long to have kids. In other words, the rise in fertility issues is because people wait too long and it's too late when they have kids.
Yeah.
True or false?
It is one of the reasons. Absolutely one of the reasons. Because, like your eggs, your quality of eggs just starts declining, like literally, like honestly, it starts declining the minute you get your first period. Like it's not.
The countdown is on.
Yeah, the countdown is on. And so the health of the egg rapidly decreases, the testosterone decreases. Even though a man actually can be producing testosterone well into his 70s, 80s super well. And so it's not the same. It's,
How unfair.
But that's a healthy man.
That's a healthy man.
That's no longer the case though, right? Like testosterone has declined massively, but we do have very easy testosterone replacement therapy, and we do that, then,
Yeah. Well, one of I think I should do an episode just focused on men's health, because it's so unspoken about also fertility might not be like the issue around fertility might not be caused by the woman.
Oh, 1,000%. So that's another problem is like, you should probably look at both of them right away. Because you could waste 2 years trying to fix her when it was actually him the whole time. This actually has happened to a colleague of mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is for another episode, but definitely a good one. And the last true or false of this section is, if your doctor says that your lab tests are normal, you have no reason to worry about your fertility. True or false?
False. Normal is average. And you have to understand, when we're doing these blood works, we're taking the averages of the population. Do you think the average today is what the average was a few 50 years ago, right? No, we're sicker, we're fatter, we're more problematic. And so your average is within, 40 years ago, cholesterol of 300 was good. Today, it's not. Where, the way we perpetuated this kind of, bad science around fats and whatnot really was a contributor to that. But, these numbers are shifting to, put people in these average categories, but average is not optimal. So you want to have a good pregnancy, you want to be optimal. So therefore, look for someone that is looking to get you optimal versus, right?
Average.
Yeah.
And I really like what you said, Sophie, that the ranges are out-fashioned.
Absolutely, and it's incorrect.
The thing is,
like a 5.7 hemoglobin A1C, you're fine, you're 5.7. No, you're literally like borderline type 2 diabetic, like you're pre-diabetic there. But they're like, you're fine, you're not 5.8 yet. Like it's stupid. You should, all of my clients, I'm like, everybody needs to be under 5.2.
Searching for this optimal is definitely, why the functional medicine approach, right?
Yeah.
Is like, let's go to the highest, the excellence point. But I'm still a bit starstruck by the fact that, like the conventional GP might, just stick to this average that is so. Anyway, it's another topic, but super good point. So thanks for that. And Sophie, now we are embarking towards the last part of the episode, which is a bit more actionable in terms of, let's talk a little bit more about protocols for fertility. What do you in clinic with your clients, like real cases? And one very first question, and I know that we got some requests from the audience, is about food, actually. What foods can boost our fertility? And here I'm asking for both women and men.
It's going to be almost same cross-border, honestly. For me, one of the favorite things to put people on for, because it could be a lifestyle, is a modified paleo diet. I love it. It's like, take your proteins, take your vegetables, and you do some dairy. You can do quality dairy. And within that, egg yolks, fish eggs. So like focus on your quality fats, your butters, your olive oils, your avocados, quality proteins, beef, chicken, do that. The most important part is you're eating healthy, you're doing well. Skip the excessive grains, it really nutritional value of whatever, nothing, but make sure that your digestion is intact. So there's almost nobody that doesn't benefit from a quality digestive enzyme. You know, like you can have the best diet in the world with your like green goddess, you know, smooth whatever. But if you're not breaking this down, it doesn't matter. It's going to putrefy and like rot in your gut. It doesn't, you know, like you need that to be broken down. You need hydrochloric acid.
Absorption.
Like the level of acidity of your stomach is your first line of defense, right? That needs to be proper. That you need to be able to digest the proteins, like break stuff down. If your acidity is incorrect, your digestion just doesn't happen.
Right.
And yeah. Also, the level of acidity is also important because it will kill viruses, pathogens, bacteria. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that's how it's meant to be. We're still apex predators. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we were eating carcasses. Do you know what? So we evolved to be able to digest that shit.
Yeah. No, it's very clear. And actually, one of the comments you made before in the very start of the episode was about vegan and vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I would like us to tell us like what foods, like if we are missing B12, right? That's going to impact fertility. So how we approach that?
But you can supplement B12, so that's fine. It'll come down to, you know, protein is the building block of life. And we have plant-based proteins and we have animal-based proteins. But the bottom line is like exclusive plant-based proteins do not have all the essential amino acids. So you need to make sure that you're getting the essentials. Because just because it says the hemp milk has 80% protein, it really doesn't, it has 80% of non-essentials, right? Like you need 80% of essentials that are creating muscle protein synthesis. And, you know, so there's a spectrum there and there's a bit of confusion with plant protein, like plant-based supplements versus animal-based supplement, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason there isn't a supplement with D2 and K1.
Right.
It's D3 and K2 because D3, you know what I mean? Like, It's
well, we're going to get now into the supplement question, but I guess, you know, key message here is that anyone, any case, should be working with a professional like yourself to go through this, right?
Yeah.
Because as you said before, right, it's precision medicine, personalized, you know, approach. So, well, good. And of course, you were kind of anticipating this, but it's about supplementation, right? And what are targeted supplements that we can use for fertility?
One of my absolute favorites and favorite brands also is Body Bio. And they have one of the best quality phosphatidylcholine that really goes through the cellular support. It's amazing. Wow. Also by Body Bio, they have, it's like a commercial for them, but you know, it's not. I have no affiliation, but I just love the product. They have a really good quality TUTCA, which is like a bile acid, which will help you break down the fatty acids. Like it's digesting, like helps your gallbladder and the bile flow. So it actually helps you emulsify the fats so you really digest it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, when you have greasy hands and you wash it with soap and it like that emulsification that happens, so it breaks down the fat inside.
Super interesting.
And they also have a really good quality butyrate, sodium butyrate, which is amazing gut support. Yeah. Like that's what, like for your colon.
That's a separate
it's
one.
Really, really, really good.
Definitely. Well, good insights. Well, Sophie, I learned tons. I'm sure that anyone listening to us is also doing it. I love that you have, you know, very clear views on things. And of course, we spoke about always from a functional medicine hat that you hold. Last question of the episode is a controversial one, because I want to make sure anyone listening to us can be someone going through this fertility journey, a practitioner as well. Like, what's the single biggest mistake that people are still making for fertility nowadays?
Honestly, for me, it's like getting really saturated into that personal care thing with like, you know, using scratch Teflon at home and like really removing that amount of toxic exposure is really crucial. Yeah, if you want to wait a bit later in life, we can totally work with that, right? Like these are fixable things. I don't want you to be like, well, I guess I'm gonna have a baby at 19. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I myself had my first child at 36 and the second one at 39, right? So, and it went fine because I said I had the foundation. Clean up the toxic exposure. You do not realize until you start cleaning up how, and you know what, the minute you really start cleaning it up and then you have exposure to it after, you realize how the headaches come instantly. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, whoa, wow. For me, that would be step one. Honestly.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow, what a strong message. And Sofi, how can anyone listening to us find you online? SofiTeleky.com. I don't really do social media. I just, but hopefully once we open up our space, then I'll get someone else to do it because I can. But yeah. Well, Sofi, thank you so much for such a powerful episode. I really enjoyed your energy, your knowledge.
Likewise.
And we will be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And for you listening to us, this was a blast. I hope that you take away so many key messages as I just did. And remember, check out, be aware of all these endocrine disruptors that you, your partners, your family, your friends, your loved ones, we are all exposed to. So don't miss out. This is super insightful. And I will see you very soon in next Sanno Health episodes. Thank you for listening. Bye now.